I want to talk to you about what can disqualify you from renting an apartment this year. The thing is, when you think about actually renting an apartment, there are a few things you need to pay attention to, like your income, your rental history, your past record, your credit, your tenant risk, among other things. So, into this conversation, I want to go quickly into those things to really explain to you what you need to be doing if you want to rent that apartment of yours really fast. Okay, let's first talk about income. One thing for sure, income and employment can influence qualification for renting, especially if you are targeting some locations. Okay, there are some cities and states that really pay more attention to let's say income. So what can really disqualify you from renting an apartment? It has to come with insufficient income. If you have an unstable employment history, if you have inadequate proof of income, for instance, or let's say you have seasonal or temporary employment, or you had recent job loss or employment. See, the whole thing is that during COVID, for instance, there are a lot of folks who actually had good jobs, and all of a sudden they became a risk. Let's say from a rental point of view. Okay, so if you have insufficient income, chances are you're not going to really qualify often, because basically landlords are paying attention to a metric called rent to income ratio. So RIR, so your rent to income ratio. So basically, they want to make sure that let's say that RIR metric is as low as possible, because basically landlords want to make sure that you can comfortably afford the rent, right? So if you have a rent to a rent to income ratio around 25 to 30%, you're basically increasing your chances of being approved. Okay, if you have inadequate proof of income, also this can disqualify you, like, because you always want to have a great documentation, like pay stubs, employment letters, tax returns, or bank statements to actually verify your income. And those that paperwork has to it has to fit the specific apartment that you're trying to rent. So the first thing is your income could disqualify you from renting an apartment. Next, you also have your rental history. So your rental history can really be a biggie. So negative rental history can disqualify you from renting an apartment. Now, what do I mean there? The thing is that property owners want to minimize the risks associated with renting to people who may not fulfill their lease obligations, right? So what they do is they actually go back to your rental history when evaluating potential tenants, because doing so provides valuable insights into your past behavior as a renter, as a tenant. Okay, so for instance, they look at your evictions history, they look at unsatisfactory references, they look at the late rent payments and outstanding balances, but also they look at the damage you actually did in your past apartment. So when it comes to eviction history, if you have a history of past evictions, basically you are giving your potential landlord a red flag, because it just tells them that you did not meet your previous lease terms and you were legally removed from the property. Okay, so what happens here is that most landlords will not even hesitate to rent their apartments to somebody else, because if you have a history filled with evictions, that's a big no. If you also have unsatisfactory references, this could also be damageable to you, because property owners, they often contact previous landlords for references, because they prefer tenants with a good track record, okay, a proven track record of successful tenancies. So if you actually have unsatisfactory references, this can be really detrimental. Now, what do I mean by unsatisfactory references? It's not just about you providing the wrong reference. No, it's also the fact that in your reference is talking about complaints, noise complaints, or your reference complains about cleanliness, or actually failure to fulfill other lease terms. and you do not want to be in that category. Okay. Also, if you have late rent payments and outstanding balances, this could be detrimental to you. And the last thing is damage. So, causing significant damage to a previous apartment can be a major disqualifying factor because it suggests that you didn't have care for the property, and this may result in the landlord incurring repair costs, which you do not want to really have. So you also have your past record. So your past record can disqualify you from renting an apartment. So besides income and rental history, your past record can really be can be really negative. So landlords will look at your criminal record. So they'll look at that for safety concerns, property damage, liability concerns, okay, community standards, and also property insurance requirements. So when I speak about safety concerns, you have to understand that a criminal record can disqualify you from renting an apartment because it can raise safety concerns for the landlord and other tenants. Let me give you an example. A landlord is highly likely to reject the application of a potential tenant with a gang activity history. This actually due to the fear that the person may bring gang members into the property, or that they will actually create a dangerous situation for other tenants. Like, so if you are in a building, for instance, safety concerns could be a big no-no. What about property concerns? I mean, property damage. I mean, some criminal activities involve property damage or vandalism, resulting in costly repairs for landlords. So, past incidents of property damage may lead to concerns about your respect for the property in the first place. Remember, the property is actually a source of revenue to the landlord. Okay, so you can't mess up with that source of revenue. Also, if you have liability concerns, so apartment managers may be legally liable for criminal activities on their property if they were aware of a tenant's criminal history and still chose to rent to them. So, to reduce liability risks, they may disqualify you if you have certain criminal convictions. They're just trying to protect themselves too. Okay. You also have community standards. So landlords have an interest in maintaining a harmonious community within their rental properties. So criminal activities can strain neighborly relationships and create a negative environment. You do not want to have that. So a history actually of criminal activity by a tenant can adversely impact the reputation of the neighborhood itself and the property as a whole. As a result, landlord may reject your application if you are a former convict because they just trying to avoid the negative association. So when you think about what can disqualify you from renting an apartment, you also need to think about credit. Obviously, for credit, you really understand. I don't need to explain further, but it's important to keep that in mind because your credit history can disqualify you from rent an apartment. And by credit history, I mean you know what I mean. If you have a low credit score, if you have outstanding debt, if you have late payments, all those can have an adverse relationship. I mean, adverse implication for your ability to actually rent an apartment. But also, I want to say something. You also have collections or judgments. So if you have collections or judgments on your credit, this could be also detrimental. I mean, those are called derogatory items, okay, or adverse items. So having accounts in collections or facing legal judgments due to unpaid debts can be a significant disqualifying factor. Okay, so landlords view them as indicators of financial instability and potential future payment problems. Of course, nobody wants to really give their apartment to someone with financial instability. Okay, so that's something to really think about. So if you want to actually rent an apartment and you want to increase your chances of qualifying real fast, make sure that your credit is even if you have a low credit score, just give them the ability to explain what happened. Okay, so you want to really explain to them what happened. And if you have a low credit score, there's nothing you can do about it, at least in the short run. But you can do something when it comes to putting a down payment. So a down payment can really help you actually allay fears of financial instability from the landlord. So this is something you should really be thinking about big time, especially from a flexibility point of view. So when it comes to credit, you also have other issues that can really disqualify you from renting an apartment this year. Like you have bankruptcy, you have foreclosure, and if you also have limited credit history, this could be also detrimental. So let me first talk about limited credit history. The thing is that it's not just about your age. If you're young, of course, you probably have no credit history or limited credit history. So this could really disqualify you from rent. It can disqualify you from renting an apartment. But even if you are an adult and you have, let's say, several years of, if you have been adults for a long time, you are in your 30s or 40s, but you haven't taken the time to build credit, this could also work in your disfavor. Okay, so this is so long story short, if you have limited credit history, it's just better to actually co-lease with someone who has credit history. This is kind of similar to what you have when it comes to credit card when you have an authorized user. So you can have a co-lease, or you can be an authorized tenant on the lease. Okay, so basically, this is an important element. If you have foreclosure, don't even think about it. I mean, it'll be very hard for you to rent an apartment this year because the foreclosure history on a previous property can also raise concerns for landlords. It really suggests that you could not meet your mortgage obligations, which may lead to concerns about rent payments because at the end of the day, payments are payments. Whether you make a payment to a bank or you make a payment to a landlord, those are cash outflows every single month. So if you have problems with one, chances are you might have problems with the other. So this is something that landlords do not want to hear about. You also have bankruptcy. Of course, bankruptcy, I don't have to explain much. I mean, a recent bankruptcy filing can actually cause, So if you have a recent bankruptcy filing, this can cause disqualification because it really indicates that you may have a recent financial crisis, and apartment owners may be concerned about your ability to cover rent and other expenses. So this is more of a financial risk mitigation point of view. You also have a tenant risk. So if you think about what can disqualify you from renting an apartment, think about tenant risk. Because apartment managers evaluate general tenant risk factors to really see whether or not they should really trust you. Let me explain here. So the thing is that it's not just about your age, it's not just about your gender, it's not just about your behavior or your history. It's just in general, okay, what kind of tendencies you have once you actually are in the apartment. So landlords often use credit reports as part of their tenant risk assessment process. Okay, let me give you an example. So your credit history, your FICO score, your FICO report may reflect a history of defaulting or breaking previous lease agreements. And so this factor alone will contribute to a higher perceived risk as a tenant, significantly impacting your chances of being approved for a new rental this year. So this is something to really think about. Also, if you have too many occupants, so apartment managers want to ensure that their properties are safe and habitable. So if you have many occupants, this really reduces, let's say, the attractiveness of the property itself. You're reducing the value of the property. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't have that many occupants. I mean, if you have a large family, that's one thing. But if you actually have if you lease an apartment and then you turn around and sublease that apartment to others, this could be problematic. Okay. You also have excessive wear and tear. So, an apartment that houses too many people is more likely to experience excessive wear and tear on the property. Think about it. And this effects actually often lead to increased maintenance and repair costs for the owner. Okay, so what happens here is that most landlords may reject your applications if you have a very large family, or an application with many roommates, because those managers, those apartment managers, they will be scared that the high number of occupants in the apartment may result in significant damages or even deterioration. So this is something to really think about. And also another reason why they might say no in terms of risk factor is that you may overload utilities. Okay, so having an overwhelming number of occupants can strain the property's utilities and infrastructure, potentially leading to problems involving, let's say, water supply, electrical systems, or even sewage system disruptions. So, something to really think about. So another reason why you could actually another factor that can disqualify you from renting an apartment has to deal with legal and liability issues in addition to insurance considerations. Let me explain. So when I speak about legal and liability issues, I mean we are in this economy, lawsuits can be very expensive, and landlords are trying to avoid lawsuits at all costs. Okay, so landlords, you have to know this, may be legally liable if their property violates occupancy regulations or an accident or injury occurs due to overcrowding. So apartment managers often enforce occupancy limits strictly to actually cover themselves. They're covering their own butts. They want to protect themselves from potential legal issues. So something to really be aware of, especially if you are having a if you are in a high risk zone. Okay, you also have insurance considerations. So many landlords and property managers carry property insurance policies that specify occupancy limits and building guidelines. And the thing is that these policies often depend on factors such as the number of bedrooms or, even better, square footage. So, to ensure that their property is protected along with potential financial interest, basically, those insurance companies or those insurance policies actually are kind of strict. So because they are strict, landlords and or property managers might turn down applicants who plan to accommodate too many people, which could lead to non-conformance with insurance requirements. So that's really something to think about. So in short, if you think about what can disqualify you from renting an apartment this year, think about your income, your employment, your rental history, your criminal record, your credit history, but also general risk factors. Okay, so consider these factors while you move through the stages of applying for rental apartments. And many of these factors relate to your credit situation. And if your credit score is actually one of your biggest challenge, maybe you wanted to really think about that first. Okay, it's just better to start fixing that part first before actually moving forward. In conclusion, to this conversation, I spoke to you about what can disqualify you from renting an apartment. So I spoke about income, rental history, past record, your credit, but also your tenant risk. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.